When the former Greek colonies on the coast of Asia Minor rebelled, the Greeks became involved in border disputes with the Persians. After the first Persian invasion under the Persian king Darius was prevented at the Battle of Marathon, there was disunity in Athens. The inhabitants of mainland Greece knew about the preparations for the second Persian invasion in 480 BC, but they were divided in their assessment. Only when the Persian emissaries were already on the move to demand signs of submission did efforts begin to unite against the impending danger, a danger that was not universally recognized as such. In the fall of 481 BC, a minority of around 30 Greek city-states gathered on the Isthmus of Corinth to form a defensive league, the Hellenic League. The most important members of this league were the Spartans, Athenians, and Corinthians. The success of the Greek resistance depended solely on the Athenians, who had become naval power, to resist the Persians. Without them, even the defensive lines that the Spartans may have built would have been useless, as the Persian fleet could bypass them. In contrast to the former Persian great king Darius, who had sent his trustworthy generals to Greece with the punitive military expedition, Xerxes personally accompanied the army and fleet towards Greece at the beginning of 480 BC. From the outset, he obviously sought to intimidate the remaining opponents as much as possible through the comprehensive mobilization of the armed forces and the spectacular staging of the advance. The size of the Persian army and the accompanying effects of its need for supplies in the areas it crossed found a strong response. It is claimed that entire rivers and lakes were drained and large areas of land were claimed solely for the purpose of supplying the Persian army with food. After Xerxes reached the Thracian coastal strip of Oriscus, he organized the order and inventory of his forces. He unloaded the ships and sent them along the coast deep into Greece. He then continued his march along the Greek coast, south to Athens. The Spartan troops were the first to arrive. King Leonidas was in command of the troops, with the majority of the Spartan forces not deployed. Xerxes first sent the Medes and Kishans against the Spartans. After a day-long battle in which the Spartans stood firm and inflicted significant casualties on the Persians, the Immortals were deployed next. The Greeks held their position for days, inflicting heavy losses on the Persians. It was only through the treachery of Ephialtes of Trachis that the Persians managed to bypass the Greek lines via the Anapaea path south of the coastal ridge and stab the Spartans in the rear. Leonidas had taken this maneuver into account and assigned part of his troops to guard the bypass pass. On the third day, scouts reached Leonidas' camp and reported to him about the bypass. From that moment on, Leonidas acted with the knowledge that a complete withdrawal would result in annihilation at the hands of the Persian cavalry. He therefore decided to hold the bottleneck with his 300 Spartans in order to ensure the retreat of the main Greek army. Other troops, whose homelands lay directly behind the pass and were therefore in immediate danger of looting by the Persians, joined Leonidas. In total, around 1,000 Greeks remained behind to cover the retreat, including the Thespians and the Thebans. These couples also consisted of an older and a younger partner. After the Battle of Thermopylae, only the Phocians in central Greece offered resistance, most of them fleeing to the slopes of Parnassus or to Amphissa in order neither to submit nor to enter into an alliance with the Persians. The Persians ravaged the country, burned Phocian cities, and, according to Herodotus, committed mass rapes on the Phocian women they captured, killing some of them. Near Panopeus, near the border with Boeotia, Xerxes divided the Persian army for further actions. One group moved through Boeotia to Athens, while another group set off for Delphi with an unclear mission, from where they returned soon and apparently unsuccessfully. Meanwhile, the Persian fleet approached Athens and the Battle of Salamis broke out. The approach of the Persian fleet to the Greek coast took place under the full moon, at night in 3 long lines, a precise maneuver that had to be carried out in strict compliance with the distances. They rode throughout the night and planned the attack in the morning. A small island called Plataea was intended as a base and for rescuing shipwrecked sailors. However, the Greeks were informed of the Persian actions in good time and were not surprised. During the battle, the Greeks were able to attack with fresh strength, while the Persians had already been working on their rowing benches all night. Despite the numerical superiority of the Persian fleet, the Greeks were able to hold their position. The Persian ships may have been hindered by their close formation, leaving them relatively immobile to attacks from the heavier Greek triremes. In the midst of the chaos on the Persian side, the Greek hoplites were able to act decisively after their boarding maneuvers. The island of Plataea was conquered by the Greeks, and numerous Persian ships and crews sank in the water. What for the Persians, who, unlike the Greeks, could not swim, was immediately fatal. After the defeat in the sea battle of Salamis, the Persian king Xerxes returned to his empire. His fleet was in disarray. However, the still powerful country's army wintered in Thessaly under the leadership of Mardonius. Mardonius initially tried to exploit existing differences between Sparta and Athens. He made peace offers to Athens to drive a wedge between the allied Greeks. After raising new soldiers and pooling all their forces, including the rowers, the Greeks fought a land battle against the Persians. The Greek army marched from the Isthmus of Corinth, where it had gathered, not directly towards Mardonius near Athens, but northwards into the enemy-free area behind the Persians. Mardonius responded to this threat to his supply lines by retreating to the allied Thebes. 5,000 Spartiates, 5,000 Perioeci, and 40,000 fighters and hoplite contingents from various polis, including 8,000 hoplites from Athens under Aristides. The Spartans and Tegeans stood on the extreme right wing of the north-facing Greek front, the traditional thrust wing of a phalanx. Mardonius placed the Persian contingent opposite them. On the left, on the Greek side, were Corinth and a few smaller polis, opposite them were the Medes. This was followed by smaller Peloponnesian polis, which the Bactrians faced. The Indian contingent of the Persians was mainly confronted with polis from Euboea. The Sakin were positioned opposite smaller polis from western and southern Greece. Finally, on the left wing, the Athenians under Aristides faced the Greek hoplites on the Persian side and the Macedonians. This disposition was only partially preserved in the later battle. The Persian land army consisted of 100,000 fighters. Treaty warfare ensued and Persian cavalry units had been attacking the Greek supply lines since the 8th day. The Athenian contingent on the left wing carried out seemingly idiosyncratic maneuvers during the night. In the morning it was unable to come to the aid of the Spartans attacked on the right wing, but instead found itself in battles with the Persian-Greek phalanx. The Peloponnesians on the right wing, initially harassed by cavalry and arrow fire, finally launched an assault that pushed the Persian ranks back and, after Mardonius was killed by a stone thrown, finally drove them to flee. The leaderless Persian army fled back to its fortified camp, but the Greeks captured this too, along with their entourage. Mardonius, 3 sons of Darius and many members of the Persian elite fell in battle. The remaining Persian troops fled. Artabatzos was initially able to lead his contingent, with which he had not previously taken part in the fight, towards Thessaly as a unit. At the battle in Mycale, the remaining 60,000 Persians, along with the Persian army, were finally routed. The defensive battle of the European Greeks ended with the Greek victories at Salamis, Plataea, and Mycale. No Persian army ever crossed into Europe again. From a Greek perspective, however, the protection of the Ionians of Asia Minor in their renewed uprising against Persian rule remained an unresolved problem. By order of Xerxes, the majority of the Persian land army remained in Thessaly over the winter of 480 BC. Due to the Spartans' refusal to take over the protection of the Greeks in Asia Minor, there was a change of hegemony in front of Byzantium in 478 BC, and thus the founding of the Attic Sea League under the leadership of Athens. This marked the beginning of the rivalry between Athens and Sparta, which eventually led to the Peloponnesian War.